There's only one president at a time, but do not tell that to one Michael Flynn. He's the national security advisor now, but he was not that this past December. Reportedly, however, it did not stop him from discussing U.S. sanctions with the Russian ambassador, while the Obama administration was simultaneously working on new sanctions on Russia. The Washington Post says that Flynn, he was talking to the Russians before Trump even won the election. Post also goes on to say that on Wednesday, Flynn said he didn't talk sanctions with the Russians, but on Thursday, the tune changed. His spokesman saying in a statement, which read in part, Flynn indicated that while he had no recollection of discussing sanctions, he couldn't be certain that the topic never came up. It also sounds like Mike Pence was out of the loop. A week before the inauguration, here's what the VP-elect said on Face the Nation.
What I can confirm, having spoken to him about it, is that those conversations that happened to occur around the time that the United States took action to expel diplomats had nothing whatsoever to do with those sanctions.
But that still leaves open the possibility that there might have been other conversations about the sanctions.
Yeah, I don't believe there were more conversations.
Should be noted, the Washington Post and New York Times, who worked on the story, cite 9 sources who said, in fact, that those conversations with Mr. Flynn and his Russian counterparts did just that. And joining us now is Norman Eisen. He's the former U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic. He's former ethics advisor for the Obama administration and now a visiting fellow at Brookings. And Norman, as always, thank you very much for the time. Ambassador, explain to people at home what the Logan Act is and whether or not it was violated if, in fact, these allegations are true.
The Logan Act is a statute on the books in the United States that prevents those who are not government officials, for example, Mr. Flynn, before he was sworn in as National Security Advisor, from conducting with or interfering in the foreign policy of the United States. Now, while it sounds pretty definitive, there's actually only been one prosecution under the Logan Act in the couple centuries that it's been on the books. So there have been frequent occasions when candidates or those working for them in an election have had contact. There hasn't been a decision to prosecute for the most part. But here we have a more serious set of allegations.
And to that end, I've heard some folks today on certain channels say, oh, you know what, we're splitting hairs. He was the president-elect and he was going to be on his team. What's the big deal, whether he did it in December or he did it in January?
Well, as you said, there's supposed to be only one president at a time. And if you think about it, that makes sense because mixed messages to our allies and to our adversaries can distort foreign policy. They can even cost American lives. And there have been some very notorious examples about this. Perhaps the most famous are the allegations, and it's still argued about, that Henry Kissinger may or may not have been engaged in contacts or in sharing information or contacts made by others relating to the Vietnam War. So it's a very serious matter.
I'm curious from your perspective, from both ethics and certainly somebody who served on the foreign side here, which is, what's worse here, the crime or the cover-up? And by that I mean, we've gotten multiple versions of answers to the same question. It seems to fit a pattern, Ambassador, which is whether you want to call it alternative facts or outright lying, that time after time, you don't get the straight story about what really happened here, and then only when proven or outed in the press do you get some acknowledgement, kind of, sort of.
Often you don't even get it when it's shown in the press. It is a problem, and you've hit on the area where the greatest risk of exposure to Mr. Flynn lies. Because we know there's an ongoing investigation of ties of those around Mr. Trump to Russia and to the campaign. And if Mr. Flynn was questioned in that investigation and did not give candid answers, or if he was questioned by the FBI in connection with his security clearance or the renewal of his security clearance, and he was not frank and candid with the FBI, he has a false statements liability. And those potential risks, I'm not saying it happened, I don't know if it happened or not, that is where the saying in Washington, "It's not the crime, it's the cover-up," comes from. Typically, where people get in trouble is in not giving these honest answers. There have been many, many more of those prosecutions than under the Logan Act. So that's we'll need to see if that second shoe drops.
And to me, the stunning part is, of all the people in the cabinet, Flynn at least had a background in intelligence. You would think he would know better. But my final question, Ambassador, is just take this week. Forgetting even the 2 weeks prior, you have Kellyanne Conway hawking Ivanka's clothing line from the East Room of the White House. You have the president actively trying to delegitimize courts and judges. You have all these misstatements and then contradictions, let alone the dysfunction. My question, and you've been a keen observer of Washington for so long, is it that they just don't know better or they just don't care?
Well, after years of working in Washington, I had the privilege to advise the president, President Obama, in his 2008-2009 transition, then to move to the White House with him under a similar set of circumstances. And I can tell you that there has been more scandal, controversy, and ethics clouds in 3 weeks of the Trump administration than we had in 8 years of the Obama White House. And I think what's happened is that perhaps President Trump didn't expect to win, and he didn't prepare. And the improvisational style, including the loose association with truth that was successful for him in the campaign, just won't cut it in a presidential transition and in the White House. His nominees are behind. He's making unforced errors every day. He's promulgated an EO that now repeated judges, Democrats and Republicans appointees alike, have struck down as unconstitutional. He himself has made a tremendous error. He's accepting unconstitutional foreign payments in violation of the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits that. And the people around him are stumbling every day, the latest being Kellyanne Conway's violation of federal law, which prohibits promotion of a private enterprise through her public office. So it's a train wreck in every respect: ethics, procedure, constitutional loyalty, and effectiveness. This is not winning.
No, and this is only 3 weeks. Ambassador Eisen, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, coming up next, like I said, first 21 days of the Trump administration, anything but smooth. Popularity, it's going down. The question is, will he bounce back or will people start jumping ship?